success follows success, right? Success is a crowded room. So like when people already see that you have made it, whatever that means, then they're much more likely to join.
From CNR JUTA De BEER, umfundisi wesizwe, formerly known as Lwazi Madonsela, bringing you a show about creative entrepreneurs live from the landmark that not only birth SA street culture but also formalize the street hustle. On today's episode, we have Chaucer Barnes. CNR JUTA De BEER special edition. Thank God for the savings. Yeah, and him. And today we have Chaucer, right? The big man from Translate. Well, United Masters Incorporated, overall, marketing director. It's your first international guest.
Yeah, that's what's up.
Which is crazy because we've only been around for 2 months.
Okay, I'm ready to make a mark, man.
Yeah,
I'm good. Yeah.
So the first question I wanted to ask, right? You coming all the way from America, you've understood what music is. You're an upcoming musician at some stage in your life. Mm-hmm. And at heart, you're still a musician and trying to get musicians' lives better in terms of marketing.
Yeah.
What is culture?
Oh man, way to start, bro. So, look, I'll just talk about it. Culture involves a lot of beliefs as well, but I'll just talk about it in terms of the way that people behave, because this is the way we talk about it at the shop, right? So, culture is really like the networks that we belong to, and then the rituals, artifacts, and languages that reinforce the bonds of those networks, right? So, there's some networks that you're born to, right? Like, so I'm black, I'm Southern, I'm from a very specific family, and those are all networks that all have their corresponding rituals, artifacts, and languages, right? Yeah. So there's inside jokes, private jokes I know, there's certain stuff that's like specific to my family. I can sit down, I can play spades with anybody, anywhere in the world, et cetera, et cetera. But then there's all these other networks that across the course of your life you opt into, right? So like I'm a, whatever, somebody's a Chiefs fan, and somebody's an Arsenal fan, and somebody's a this or that, whatever. Somebody's a podcasting, and as it relates to all that is also corresponding languages, rituals, artifacts, right? And so when we're talking about culture, we're really just talking about the way that people organize themselves into groups and then things that they use to signal whether they're part of that group or not. That's it.
Okay. Which leads to my perfect second question.
Hey!
What's culture in marketing?
Man, it's not any different. It's not any different, right? So like the aim might be different, right? So there's certain cultural practices that you're gonna go through just in order to make a network stronger, just in order to make a bond stronger between people. When you're applying marketing to it, all you're trying to do is you're trying to insert a product or a service or brand value into that equation somewhere, right? So when you look at, any of the work that we're really proud of, you're generally looking at Take the S. Carter. Yeah. The S. Carter was Steve Stout, my founder's kind of brainchild, and he put that in the Reebok at a time where there had never been a successful shoe for a non-athlete, right? So they're looking at him crazy, like, this guy doesn't run, he doesn't jump, he doesn't shoot, he doesn't even have a six-pack. Like, what are you talking about? How's he going to sell a shoe? And obviously he knew he was going to sell a shoe, but what's important about that is that now the S. Carter is really just an artifact, right? And what that artifact signaled was that when you purchased that shoe and you wore that shoe, it suggested this certain alignment with a certain set of values, right? A certain set of beliefs, et cetera, right? And so when you're in marketing, all you're doing is one of two things. You're either putting new artifacts, rituals, or language into an existing network, right? So people who already know each other, or you're creating a brand new network around a new artifact or ritual or what have you, right? So a ritual, good example of that is like Budweiser Made in America. Yeah. It's a music festival, right? So the year you start that, there's 90,000 kids that show up. They're all wearing red, white, and blue. You didn't tell them to wear red, white, and blue, right? They figured this out on their own, right? It's this celebration of Americana on the terms of Young America, woo, 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 woo. But the idea of that moment, right, those 2 days in Philadelphia, is that like people come as strangers, but then they walk away as a network, right? They have this shared experience. Yeah. And then ideally, right, you got the beer as the artifact, right? Like, so like the things that they take away from that experience that then signal that they went, right? Whether it be a ticket stub or a beer cozy or whatever it is, those are the things that really signify like, yo, I was there. Yeah. Right? That's all that's happening in marketing, right? When you get it right. A lot of marketing is not that. There's plenty of marketing that's like, yo, you can get this carpet rolled out in your house for, $9 a square foot, whatever it is. Like it's just informative, right?
Yeah.
It's not trying to push culture. It's not trying to create, collective action. It's just like, yo, you should be aware. Such and such is now $9.99.
Okay, cool. So I'm a small scale creator, right?
Yeah.
How do I package youth culture? That little niche that I find. Let's say I make music. I'm an R&B act.
Yeah. Well, look, package it for whom? Who are you packaging it for?
Packaging it for like a water brand, Valper.
Oh, got it. So you want the brand to support you and your specific
And growing my community and maintaining it.
Well, look, there's no real, magic wand to wave. Like, there's a lot of people. You gotta understand, like, the broad majority of people, success follows success, right? Success is a crowded room. So, like, when people already see that you have made it, whatever that means, then they're much more likely to join, right? So, if you got the analytics to prove like this water can't survive without you, right? Then you package that up, right? But I'm assuming you're asking the question from a position of like, yo, I'm not already at a place where it's undeniable that you want to be with me, right? And I think in that case, number one, you got to understand, like, you're looking for a very specific type of person, right? It's easy to get misled by the brand name, right? So, like, I went to an event last night. It's a Valentine's event, clearly, right? And so you so busy seeing Valentine's, you forget there's real human beings behind that are making those decisions. And generally what you're looking for is somebody who either prides themselves on discovering something new and breaking something new, right?
Yeah.
And you can look for that in people, right? Because you can see what people brag about, right? And if people brag about, like, look, if you brag about, I can put this in American terms. I hope it translates. There's certain types of clients that they get in the room with Beyonce and they take the picture, and it's like, and then you see it on LinkedIn or whatever. Like, you see it and they're like proud that they stood next to Beyonce for 5 minutes, whatever it is, right? But then there's other clients who's like, they'll stand next to somebody you don't know and they'll be like, you're gonna know her, and then taking pride in that, right? And those are the people that, as just to follow the example, those are the people that pride themselves on breaking something new.
Yeah.
So you're always gonna look for that person first, and don't get misled by, whatever brand that they represent. Like, don't stop at the logo of the brand. Look for the people behind it, and then look for that person. And then look, when you're trying to package it, there's a reason the Greeks built their theaters that way, right? They built the theaters in round. So that the audience could see the audience react. Like, your laugh is always going to be bigger if somebody's looking across and they can see somebody else laughing. It's always going to get a bigger laugh. It's always going to get a deeper cry. So to the best of your ability, try to take somebody and put them in the environment where you're really thriving, right? Where they can see the reaction to your work, not just your work. Does that make sense? So, like, don't play them a track if you could take them to a concert. There's a great story about Adidas. The kind of capitalized moment for hip hop was Adidas' $1 million check to Run DMC, right? And the important thing about that story is, like, ostensibly he could have just played him the record, My Adidas. It's not like he didn't have the record.
Yeah.
Right? But when the guy is standing in Madison Square Garden and he can see 18,000 people react, right?
Yeah.
Then now it's like you've removed so much math, right? You just taking all the math out the equation at that moment.
It's not about strategy anymore. It's about community.
He's like, holy, right? So find ways to not just show your contribution, show the reaction to that contribution. Make sure you package that up. So even when I'm selling work, bro, like, I'm selling work to major brands that already know I'm the shit, right?
Yeah.
Can I personally?
Yeah.
All right. Like, these brands, I think they've won every award, blah, 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 blah. I still go the extra mile to be like, hey, let me show you what this looks like at full maturity. I'm not going to show you the script and the billboard. I'm going to literally show you the case study from the future. I'm going to write you the case study from next year with all the metrics in it, with all the blah, blah, blahs. I'm going to, like, take some people and show, like, I'm literally make you a video and it's like, here's the reaction to the work that you're about to put in the world. And if you don't have that reaction as an artist, I ain't gonna say fake it, because you can't really fake it.
Yeah.
But you can create the theater in which, you can show the way that you want to be reacted to.
Mm-hmm.
That's the shortest shortcut that I know.
So we creating, right? And we start having fan bases, we start having people supporting us, sometimes in a monetary way, sometimes in literally just reposting the simple act. How do I then package it and say, yo, I'm trying to leverage my community? What's the best way to leverage a community?
I mean, first and foremost, like, they got to know their community, right? So everybody who's making every single one of those individual actions, they don't necessarily know that they're making it in concert with everybody else. So how do you build? So you got to think of that like it's like you think about a wheel, right? You got the hub, so let's call you the hub, and you got the spokes, right?
Yeah.
But the spokes all interacting with you individually, so you need that outer ring so that they know. You see what I'm saying? Like that they know that they're a movement and not just an individual that's rocking with you. Does that make sense? So you got to find ways to, number one, link them together. Number one, you got to find activities for them to do in concert, which, you know, the pun there is obvious, but you got to find ways for them to cooperate to unlock something of even greater value to them than they can unlock individually. And to the extent that you can do that, they will become a navy, a beehive, a this, that, the other, whatever, what have you. And people get, depending on what kind of, you know, media you're working in, people get really territorial about having been there first, right? People get really like, yo, I was with you at cassettes, bro. Like, what you talking about? And while a lot of people talk about, you know, the downsides of that, that's really an invitation to be great. So you already monetizing this fan base. You should start thinking about how do you timestamp when you came into the fan base to be another source of value creation for that person, right? Because they telling the story. They're your fan to a certain extent because they like to consume what you do, but they're also telling a story about themselves, right? By consuming what you do. Like when I shop an artist and I hang them on my chest, hang them on my wall, or playing for somebody else or whatnot, I'm trying to tell a story about myself, about my taste level, about my values, whatever, what have you. And so, you know, when people are taking that great pride in being early on in a movement, you gotta create the memorabilia for that. Like, you ever seen somebody? I was just talking about this. You ever seen somebody in a brand new Harley jacket, like a Harley Davidson jacket, and it's fresh, it's crispy?
Nope.
It's ridiculous. They look ridiculous. It's like, oh, okay, you're new to this, right? But when it's nice and broken in, it's like, oh, okay, so you're a biker. You look like a tourist in a brand new Harley Davidson jacket. They don't got no scratches, creases, whatever. You look like the purist when it's broken in. So you gotta think about, of all of the different things that you do, how do you timestamp people and how do you make sure that it's clear that they were there first? Number one, they're gonna jump higher, they're gonna be more appreciative, they're gonna be louder about it. And then you're also making sure that you don't, as you start to grow, that they don't have resentment of that growth. That in fact, that growth is telling their story too. Just telling the story again.
How do you avoid the
their
resentment?
taste, their this, that, the other. That's what I'm saying. I think you avoid the resentment by making sure that they're stamped early, right? This is my A1 day ones. This is my front row. This is my front. I was watching last night at the event, and I'm looking at all these kids. Waffles is up there, right?
Yep.
Crushing it, and all these kids, they doing something with their hands. It was like very coordinated. There's the waffles. Yo, I'm looking at the show. I'm like, yo, this right here, obviously is not, you know, serendipitous. They ain't coming up with this on the spot. Like, this is a thing. And so that action, like what that action signaled was that they were deeper in their fanhood than everybody else who didn't know the motion, right? But then you so like that's the activity, that's the behavior stamping them, right? Yeah. So now the opportunity then becomes, yo, how do I give you something that stamps you permanently? Okay. Right? And then what'll happen is, if they know the dance, what they're gonna do is they're gonna resent when everybody knows the dance, right? But that's because there's no stamp. It's like, yo, he was in that first. There's no color code. It's like, and one day once.
So, okay. Oh, no, this is crazy. How do you scale community? Because you, from a perspective of marketing, and marketing is always about like, yo, we see this act, they doing these type of numbers and the United Masters, we're trying to translate them into like Budweiser, made in America, let's headline them. How do we scale an act? Any creative, in fact, just open it up.
I mean, you know, it's somebody, you gotta be wary of anybody who's like, oh, well, here's exactly how you do that. right? Because it's like, it ain't, it's not really a recipe like that. I will say that there's some tenets though. And I think the first is, back to that earlier point, you gotta understand that everybody's driving their own narrative, now more than ever before, right? You could have argued this in 1960, but now in a Web 2 world, everybody's telling a narrative about themselves. They're projecting a desired social identity, right?
Yeah.
So how you factor into that, if you acknowledge that you are an ingredient in the story that they're telling, and that you're not the center of their world, I think you're in a better place, right? But you start to think about, there's some basic conditions for spread, and they're not completely. I mean, the best metaphor for it is actually viral spread, right? So like, you got the virus, you got carriers, you got strand mutation, right? And then you've got some artificial kind of circumstances that you can create that will accelerate, like whether or not something like a virus moves around, like a crowded boat or a crowded plane or a crowded auditorium or whatever. And you got some environmental factors that are just out of your control, but that, herpes thrives in the summer and tuberculosis thrives in the winter, right? And so if you take those and you start to think about like, all right, well, boom, well, the virus is like my content, it's my idea, it's my IP, it's my whatever, right? It's my art. Yeah. And then you start to think about, well, who are the right carriers? Well, that's just like, who's the credence bearer that can really like, that people trust, that has authority here. Not just like famous, right? Like they have authority in this thing that I'm doing.
They're a tastemaker, not an influencer.
Yeah. And then when you talk about like strand mutation, like when you start to convert that to your art, it's like, well, how else do people use this, right? And how many different ways can it show up where it's still thematically linked to me?
Yeah.
Right? So like, I got fist pick in my hair, right? There's a million different ways to express a black fist, right? Sometimes it don't even gotta be black. Like you paint it purple and stuff, so a purple fist over here is still a black fist, right?
Yeah.
So you gotta think about all the different ways, all the different formats that you can really produce your art in, right?
Yeah.
So that it has more of an opportunity to like leak into different spots and places and whatnot. And then you gotta understand, you gotta create those conditions for yourself where things are tight. Like I was just explaining with when you package something up, like put people in the same place at the same time, gazing at the same thing, talking amongst themselves, reacting, blah, 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 blah. And then that fifth thing, you just got to understand there's seasonality to everything, right? You go, the conditions for scale, when you get to that place where you're starting to think about, what that is out of my control can still be to my advantage, right? What can I, right? Take, for example, when it's time to start working with brands, for example, you gotta understand, like, these brands, they operate on fiscal years. So, like, if you know when the fiscal year is, you walking in, you way better off, you way better stacked than anybody who doesn't. Because you don't know if somebody's at the end of their budget or if they just got a fresh budget. You know when to hit them. It's like, oh, is it June to June fiscal? Boom, I'm gonna be right on you June 30th.
Yeah.
Because I know you flush with budget now. You don't even know what to do with it. I know to check in. And I know not to ask you for money in March, right? I know to just start working on a relationship in March and whatnot. And I know when you're going to get re-upped, right? So you just got to, if the question is scale, those 5 things are the things to keep in mind. But there's no magic, there's no yellow brick road. Like, don't let nobody tell you that.
How do you build brand relationships?
I mean, it's like any other relationship in the sense that, like, it's better if they approach you first. Like, you can always have more. It's like, our eyes met, but somebody was looking first.
Yeah.
And you're always in a better position if a brand is looking first, right? But again, the reminder is the brands that behind these big, powerful brands and logos and visual identities and all this stuff, there are real people.
Yeah.
And those real people have real interests, and they have real uncles and friends and pastimes and blah, 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 blah. And, the richest brand relationships, even at the, let's call it the level of the game where I'm working with brands who know that they need my services, right? You just gotta know the people. You gotta know the people. If you're just talking talking to them as one-dimensional, like this is all you mean, right? Is where you sit in this org chart at XYZ brand. That's the same thing as when anybody talks to you one-dimensionally, like you only one thing, right? And they don't show any kind of, if somebody's at you and they like, clearly they only one on this podcast, they don't care what your name is, they don't care what like how your brother's doing, nothing. They don't care anything else about you, then like that's not gonna go well, right?
Yeah.
The same thing is true. These are real people with real ambitions. Most of them just want to get promoted. They want the next job, right? They not trying to not do something hot. No, that having been said, there's plenty of people who are trying to not do something hot. But the ones that you should be looking for are not, right? They are ambitious in their own respect. And you gotta figure out how you can feed and supply that ambition, how you can fuel their ambition as well.
This podcast has one of the most important questions when we come to the end.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
What's your word to the youth, the next generation of creatives? I need you to look to the camera for this one.
Yeah. Let me think before I, you know what I'm saying? Man, my word to the youth is stay making and stay owning. That's it, man. Like, you gotta really stay productive. And sometimes, you know, as artists, we can hit dry patches in the media that we're used to making.
Yeah.
But you gotta just push through that. You gotta stay productive no matter what. Even if you hate what it is that you're making, or even if you start to like slide off and start to make something else that's like adjacent to that thing that you make, right? So like, pick up a paintbrush, make a LinkedIn post, do anything to just stay active and stay in the pocket of making things for human consumption, right? And then you just gotta make sure you own it, man. Like, I understand the temptation and the validation that comes, right, with other people monetizing you directly, kind of sponsoring you or patronizing you, if you will. But you just gotta understand where those price tags are, right? So I tell anybody, like, you know, at United Masters, we're always talking about independence, and a lot of people contrast that with signing to a label, right?
Yeah. And
the truth is, labels have always historically been exploitative, pretty much since artists could get famous on their own. Like, if you get famous on your own, what is a record label for, right? And so, you know, you think back to like when Prince wrote "Slave" on his face, and like that, he was right, but now it's just like, it's obvious that the whole thing is kind of turned inside out. And I get why people think that we're anti-label. We're not anti-label, we're anti-exploitation. So like, there is a label deal out there for somebody that is not, I own your name, I own your face, I own your next 6 projects, this, that, the other, and like you can't will nothing to your kids. There is a deal out there for somebody like that. The problem is, and has historically been, that people get so intoxicated. They get so intoxicated by the validation that comes. Like, you get to go home and tell your mom or your auntie or your 10th grade English professor, whatever it is, they're like, yo, I made it. That they forget the price tag that's coming with that validation and that initial check. You dig?
Damn.
So I'm not saying don't take on partners. I'm not saying there's no reason for anybody else to participate in the financial reward of what you create culturally, because that's what having a team is. And you're not gonna scale. You're not gonna achieve anything if you gotta move every single level. I am saying, understand what the price tag really is. And understand, you know, at the end of the day, and I'm pointing this specifically at the youth, there ain't gonna be like, my path is gonna be much harder to replicate, right? So like, I took an entry-level job in one of the finest creative institutions there was, and that's great. That's great. It's done really well for me. But but you gotta know that the creative class is the whole hope for the future, right? Like, there's so many jobs that's about to disappear. There's so many. This is a very real challenge on the usefulness of humanity in a lot of disciplines that you think of as like high status already. Yeah. Lawyers, bankers. This is not gonna be an investment banker. It's a human being. In 25 years, it would be ridiculous.
Yeah.
Right? So like when you think about like the creative classes, as we think about it, like people who practice the humanities, people who make things for human consumption that come truly from a place of imagination, like that's the real hope for the future. And so that ownership piece is so key to it, and especially for Black and brown youth, and especially from youth from underrepresented markets globally. Like, I don't care if it's a dance. If it's a dance, figure out a way to get that on Web3 and get your quote unquote trademark going. Just own your work.
Yeah. Chaucer, Corner Juta De Beer, special edition for real.
Yeah.
Like and subscribe. Thank you for coming to the show.
Thanks for having me.
The insights were really insights.
Hey,
it's like,
man.
We scaling now. We getting better.
I'm excited for y'all, man. Respect.
Thank you for coming to the show.